Welcome back to the Oasis podcast. Thank you everyone for joining me. Today I have a brand new guest, another brand new guest for you all. My very special, probably one of my, I think you don't, yeah, I've known you the longest out of everyone that's a friend, honestly.
Oh wow,
So,
I get that. I get
wow,
that. I
right?
get that. I get that weight and
You
privilege.
special Adi. So, yes, my wonderful, one of the besties, my homeboy, Adi. Welcome.
Hello. Well, it's nice to be here. Obviously, should I do the long time? First time, long time, first time. No, yeah. I guess we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
It's since the high school days. I've seen you blossom from a valedictorian to a wonderful young lady who now has a podcast and many listeners and people who she's influencing in a positive way. So that's very cool to see. Me, myself, for those of you who obviously have never been introduced to me, my name is Adi. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I'm now living in Miami, Florida.
Hey.
Been here for about 10 years. I think, like every other Hispanic New Yorker, at some point you make a migration to the South. And I made that migration back in 2010. It wasn't out of want; it was out of necessity. But it was interesting. It's been fun, and I definitely have grown to love this as a second home. But Brooklyn is still, near and dear to my heart. It's still home.
That's right. Rep it. All right. Whenever I want to get away, I run to Miami and visit Adi. Reconnect. We connect. And then I go back to my real world rather. He lives in a vacation place. So
I don't know about that anymore now, right? With everything that's going on.
oh goodness. Oh goodness. So today's topic, we're talking about breakups. Ooh, lot. As I've mentioned in previous podcast episode, I have recently had a breakup, and I know this is something that most people can relate to, but Adi and I, we talk about lots of stuff. And so breakups is definitely one of them. And I know, well, hopefully you'll share with us. I know that you've experienced a breakup recently that we've talked about. And
is that
so,
what that was?
I'm sorry?
Is that what that was?
You're going to have to fill people in so that they can decide. I don't know. I think that's what it was. I don't know. Right? And so, everyone's hearing my perspective, but it's always great to hear a fresh, new perspective. And I love story time. So we're going to start off with story time, right? So please share with us. Yeah. What you would like about the experience you had, since you don't know if you should categorize it as a breakup, the experience that was had, so we could talk our shit.
Well, the reason why me and her are laughing is because I don't know. It wasn't a traditional, as you would call, breakup. It was one of those things where it's not like you get broken up by text message. I was living with my ex for about a year and a half. I have known her for about 5 years. We met through work. Um, it organically happened. One day, just kind of one thing led to another, wound up going out, and then somehow it led to on New Year's Eve, she wound up on my doorstep, and it flourished from there. It was on and off, honestly, for about the whole time, for the whole 5 years, up until the last year and a half. Just because we were at different stages of maturity. It seemed like literally a step by step for each of us, where I would progress, but she would lag a little behind, and then she would progress, and so on and so forth. So it kind of went on like that for about 2 or 3 breakups. But then the last one, as you know, ended really abruptly. Uh, where out of nowhere, the day before Thanksgiving, she decides to let me know that she wants to have a conversation about our relationship, but being that it's the morning, I have to go to work. I kind of told her that I would put it off for later on in the day when we both got home from work. She agreed. I went on, went to go get ready, and by the time I finished getting out of the shower, she was in our closet, kind of like waiting for me in the dark, which was kind of creepy. Um, but it was one of those situations where I felt where the direction of the conversation is going. I mean, I'm 32 years old, going on 33. I think anybody who's grown enough knows the conversation where it's heading when you're putting certain words together. And also, when a conversation can't wait in a relationship when y'all live together, that's a red flag.
Right.
And that was my red flag. But again, in that moment, I didn't think anything of it because up until that point, we hadn't had any big arguments or anything that was major that would lead me to believe, oh man, she's one step out of the door, or her heart's not in this relationship. So it caught me very off guard when in this moment she decided to make a very quick left turn and go, hey, I think we should be friends. I'm like, okay, which is shocking because again, I've lived with you for the past year. So, I mean, a person that you're in a relationship with, that you're living with, it's hard to go, hey, I just want to be friends. Like that left turn is a very hard left turn to make when you live with someone. So again, I was shocked in the moment more than anything. Later on, I came to find out that she took that shock as me not caring. So when I kind of responded as, okay, she took it as, oh, so it's just okay. And I'm like, I gotta go to work, and you kind of dropping this on me now. Like, can we finish this later? And I don't even think I even coherently got that out. I think that's what I intended to say. But what probably came out was like, I gotta go, and
Yeah.
that's where it was left. So when I came home, all her stuff was gone, which I'm grateful that she didn't, do anything petty other than take my birthday gift.
Yeah, that was petty, fam. That was petty. Okay.
It was slightly, maybe just a tad a bit of petty, but I try honestly to look at every situation as a learning opportunity, as opposed to looking at it with malice or looking at it as something that against that individual. It's something that I can learn about myself, and it's something that I obviously can learn from that person. So the lesson learned for me was obviously, the selfishness on her part had shown itself before. I mean, one of the breakups that we had was actually on her birthday while I was living in Houston. I don't know if I told you about this, Tom. But yeah, I was out there in Houston, and like I was out there for a work opportunity, and I was out there all alone.
Yeah.
So she was one of the few contacts that I had that felt homey, that let me feel like I had an escape. Right. So, it kept me grounded. So on her birthday, out of nowhere, I don't know. And again, up until that point, we have been talking about, hey, her moving out to Houston to be with me. And abruptly out of nowhere, she just said, I'm done. And that, mind you, in the moment, she was very drunk. So I didn't take it for what it was. But the next day when she didn't hit me up and so on and so forth, it wasn't until like maybe a couple weeks later, she was like, hey, did I really do this? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, that's something I've been thinking about. It's not something I want to tell you. And I was like, well, it's kind of out there now. So, and then again, it's just one of those things that from there, it took a lot from that point, because I'm the type of person that if you break my trust once, it's kind of hard for me to come back. Right. So she's one of the rare people that I've let that happen to. And then it escalated to the point where we started living together. So, which that's the first person that I ever started doing that with,
Right.
So again, it was just a lot of things that led to me not seeing, but then again, having some warning signs, which I think happens in all relationships. Okay. I think everybody can speak to that first opportunity where something is going on.
Right. So you jumping ahead. So now you're giving us some meat, right? And so I'll share my story too. And then I guess we can dissect and talk about the red flags, the things that we overlook, because of course it's always after the fact we're like, you know what? Well, mostly after the fact. There were some things I think we both, in both our situations, that happened while it was happening, we're like, nah. But we still kind of like, all right. You know?
Yeah.
And so for my situation, I kind of gave, like, when I did speak about it in the previous episode, it was like a brief kind of like, we're broken up and, you know, here's where I am mentally. But for that situation, I think this probably was the most adult breakup I've ever had in my life. And so, right? Clap, clap, clap. It took me 30 some years to do it.
Hey man, progression.
Because them other breakups, listen. And it really was something that it initially, for him, it might have seemed like a surprise, but we actually did talk about this a week or so, or a few weeks ago, about everything and why for him it seemed sudden, but when we broke it down, he was just like, okay, I see. He kind of understood better now. But we had a fight that honestly wasn't necessarily something, at least to me, something that should have gotten to that point where it did. But that was the pattern that was happening. And I was realizing things were escalating in a way that made me very uncomfortable, you know, and I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done a lot of I know what I want in a relationship. And I felt like things were kind of progressing in a way that was starting to make me feel uneasy, right? So we had this fight. The fight escalated, I mean, ridiculously, to the point where I really did lose my cool, but I felt like I was, I'm a Leo, of course, you know. And I felt like I literally was a lion. I felt like I was a lion being backed up into a corner, but because for so long I was acting like a pussycat, like I think people forgot I was a fucking lion, right? To the point where I literally was like begging and like pleading, please stop. You know, I really want to stop this conversation. It's not going in a good place. I don't want to continue. Like, I think we should cool down. Let's stop. And I guess he was in a place, in the mindset where he needed to get what he needed to get out. And then he started really saying some things to me that really started hitting a place. And I lost my shit. Like, I lost my shit. And even then, I was still contained in me losing my shit, right? And so after that, I literally ended up leaving the apartment. I was like just so hot. Coming back, didn't speak. And the following, like that whole night into the following, actually like a whole day passed. And then it was when I decided, like, yeah, you know what? I don't like how this is felt. I don't like being pushed into this space or place. I don't think that that's anywhere I want to go. And things have been escalating. So I'm like, I can't imagine what the next fight is gonna look like, right?
Yeah.
But also there were other things, like we'll talk about, there were other red flags, there's other things that I already felt was there that really just didn't make us compatible. And so yeah, and I was like, yeah, I think we should break up. Like, that was the decision. I was like, we're gonna break up. And so like it was like a Saturday morning, you know, I asked, you know, he was at that point, he was sleeping on the couch. And you know, I came in and asked him, like, hey, you know, do you have the mental space to have a conversation right now? He was like, yeah. And I said, you know what? I think we should break up. You know, like, and I'm willing for us to be friends, this and that and third. And honestly, that conversation, of course, was like emotion filled, but we were able to talk. And then after that, we were able to talk. Now at this point, you know, we were living together, so like, you know, and I told him, I was like, I'm not kicking you out right away. Like, I'm gonna give you the time that you need to kind of figure things out. So while he was still here for a week after the breakup, we like talked. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had moments of like, hey, you know, this is how I feel, and hey, this is what's going on in my head, and blah blah blah. And so like, to me, that was like the most adult shit I ever did in my life. Like, usually when I break up, when I break up, it's like, boom, get out of here, you're gone, I don't want to talk to you again. It's usually really, really super ugly. But I felt like we were able to, like, because we cared about each other. I still care about him.
Yeah.
Not that he's a terrible person or anything like that. So, but yeah, that was my breakup. Yeah. So you already mentioned that there were things you overlooked and red flags, and you told me about the Houston story, but you told me after the breakup, the last breakup. So I didn't know all that had happened when it was happening, which you love to do. But anyway, it's cool because I love you. So yeah, I mean, when you told me your story about everything, I was like, I noticed things when I did come down to visit. I did notice things. You know, when I was down there, we talked about stuff. So
Mm.
I noticed things. But what were the things that you, in hindsight, you noticed were red flags or things that you overlooked that, you know, really was hinting at something a little deeper for you?
Well, I mean, I think the major thing, like I said, was like that Houston thing was maybe probably the biggest red flag, just because it spoke to her impulsive nature. Um, that again, I think I took for granted, or I allowed myself to get comfortable,
Mm,
to the fact that she does have a selfish nature about her. Um, and it does come from a place of hurt. And again, that's where I say where, a lot of us, I think, for me, myself personally, when I try to look at things after the fact and try to look at things from a perspective of, let me try to be as positive as possible. Let me see what they may have been going through that may be
mm-hmm.
put them to that point, right?
Right.
And I know her history. I know she's gone through domestic situations, obviously not with me, but
Yeah.
I know in her history she's gone through those type of
Oh,
things
I didn't
where
know that. Okay.
so it's one of those things where I don't know what it is. I've had my relationships, and that's a common thread. And I don't know what it is.
You got I'm sorry, you have terrible, terrible luck with women, fam.
Yeah. So, um, that's always, I don't know what it is, man. It's like it's always a common thread where it's like at women that I date at some point in time have been battered,
Mhm.
and there are negative repercussions for it.
Yeah.
But for more than anything, what I've learned is I think that if I were faced with that in the future, I don't think. Funny enough, I realize that I'm not going to be as negative towards it as I would think because
Mhm.
of my track record. I actually think that I would take a different approach and try to see if that person would try to get help, as
Mhm.
opposed to
Yeah.
looking at it as well, I can deal with it. I'm your man. I'm strong enough. I can be
Mhm.
the emotional support. I can be the thing
Show
that
you
you need
something
to get.
different.
Yeah, so I think I put myself in a position where I try to be a knight in shining armor. Where I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not and it's again not in an offensive way. It's just I'm not in that position to dissect and understand fully what it is that you need in that moment. And then again, you yourself are troubled and trying to figure it out yourself and why it makes you do certain things that seem selfish in nature, but what they are is defensive in nature.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes that's misconstrued um, in a lot of different ways, especially unfortunately more for women than it is for men.
Mhm.
Um, I think women, when they lash out, especially if it's in sexual nature, it's looked at in a certain light. Whereas if a man does the same thing and tries to explore himself in that fashion,
Yeah.
it's looked at in a different light. And you're allowed almost to kind of explore
Mhm.
yourself in that fashion if you're a
Mhm.
man. Whereas if you're a woman, you're not so much allowed. So it's almost like I can't speak for a woman in that aspect, so I can't help you through a journey that I can't imagine to go through. That if
Right.
somebody beat me in my relationship, I'm like, wait, it's never getting to that point in my mind where somebody's beating me.
Mhm.
So again, mentally, that prison, I can only imagine where she's at, where it again puts her in a place where she feels like I got to get out before it gets to a point where
Mhm.
she
Yeah.
feels like I don't know where she feels again because she never spoke to me. The only thing she left me was a letter saying that, hey, I feel like you felt like you didn't care, and this is how I feel. And basically, what she told me is that I built her up. She's grateful for me building her up, but she's at a place where she's felt like we've outgrown each other. But
Mhm.
again, it's a conversation that I wish we would have had face to face as opposed to, you know, her taking that decision and kind of running with it and going, well, there's no point in turning back because I felt like, well, damn, that's that's a place where we can actually have a conversation. That's an actual growing point where, hey, if you feel that way, well, let's dissect where that's coming from.
Right.
Why? Why do you feel that way? Because I don't feel that way. And
Right.
let's see why you feel that way and I don't. Because again, you're making a decision for me. It's one thing to make the decision for yourself because you feel that we've outgrown ourselves, but
Mhm.
I didn't feel that way. And again, it's one of those things where it's like it's a crazy thing knowing the progression that we've made separately and together to get to that point and have her break my trust that way, and then feel that it was okay because I
Yeah.
did get to speak to her on the phone that day, that night that it happened, but it really didn't lead anywhere. I was still in an emotional place at that point. So it was more me shouting and being upset more than anything. But her overall response was just like,
It is what it is.
hey, look, it is like it had to get to this point. You knew it had to get to this point. You had to have noticed. I'm like, I had to have noticed. As you know, I was in the hospital for about 2 weeks, leading up to that. So it was like my mind wasn't in a place of thinking of my relationship. My mind was in a place of thinking of my health for the first time in my life, because it's my first health scare ever. It was also the 1 year anniversary of my grandmother passing away. So that was a difficult place for me to be in, as you know, because that's like that was my rock. That's
I know.
So it was a difficult time for me mentally, and I feel like for her to make a decision about where I was in my headspace and then go, okay, see, you just ain't right for me. It's just like, what? Like I'm not in my head right now where I'm right for anything. Like I'm just trying to get through it. And I thought you were on this ride with me. Like there's times where the shoe was on the other foot that I rode with you through those bad moments. We get to the end of that ride and we're good. Like, and I feel like it was selfish because I didn't get extended that same courtesy where it's like, man, here I am in a mental place where it's like, how do you know that's not the straw that breaks my camel's back? How do you know that doesn't start my downward spiral to a place where God knows where I go? You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things where it's like, man, it was very selfish in all standpoints. I've tried to, as many times as I can, try to talk myself into saying, well, there was a reason behind it. But I mean, I understand it was selfish, but it's just like it's hard to fathom why. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if I would want to know the reason why if she extended the courtesy to tell me, because at this point I'm past it.
Yeah.
I've learned the lesson from it. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the time we spent together. I'm not going to let it muddy the waters. The good was good. The bad was bad. It was what it was. I can learn from both. But that for me is the important thing, is just to move forward and, better myself, because what else can I do? It's
Right.
either lay down and die or, strive and live.
Right. And yeah, that yeah. So, similar to you, not similar actually. I mean, I saw red flags, of course, and there were many things that I overlooked. And I think our stories are similar in the sense that it might have seemed, like I said, abrupt for him when things were happening, and it just so happened when like I decided to break up, like he got some bad news about his grandmother, so I felt so shitty about that. But I didn't know that was gonna happen, you know what I'm saying? So for him, it looked like a ton of shit was just landing on him, and so it was a lot to take in. But like again, I felt like again it was very adultish, and like I was able to be there for him because again he wasn't a bad person, and he's not. I still don't think he's a bad person. It's just that we weren't compatible, and there were just a lot of things that I noticed very early on in the relationship. But the difference is I did address them though, right? Like when I saw these things, like when we first met, I said, hey, this is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. And he was like, cool. This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. And this is why we decided to move forward. And as we're moving forward, I did notice, I'm like, ooh, there's some real character, I guess you could say flaws or things where I see we're bumping heads, right? I see that we don't think the same. I see that we're not along the same lines. Yeah. And I address them like, hey guy, let's talk about this. And this is how I feel. And like, this is where I am, we would talk about them. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, we're going and moving. But what ended up happening is it's talked about and it's kind of like, all right, well, I'll get to that when I get to it. It was just a number of things. And so I brought it up again. And then again, it was early on. I brought up some stuff, but it was early on. And so I wanted to be transparent. Whereas in past relationships, I would see things, wouldn't really say anything, or I would say it in such a way where it wasn't a conversation. It just was an argument, Yeah. And so I was like, I was definitely addressing this different. And I also did put his feelings in consideration because he was like, you know what? It's still very early on with us. Let's work it out and let's figure it out. And I said, okay, you know what? Let's do that. I don't want to make a rash decision based off past experiences. But like midway through the relationship, I'm like, yo, these things are still here, and I don't foresee them changing. And at the same time, I don't think it's fair to be like, oh, I need you to change these things. I think it's a matter of, I notice these things, this is how I feel about it. And if it's something that you want to rectify, then you have a choice to. But if you don't want to, I think we should both own that. And then it's up to me now to be like, do I want to live with this, or if I don't, right? So we had the conversation and we addressed things, and then again, certain things are happening. Some movement is made, but then the integral things movement is not being made. And so you start to build this. I don't want to say resentment. I don't think it got to resentment yet, but you start to build up, I guess, the wall that you kind of put down to get into the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it just got to a funny fuzzy place where I think we both lost comfortability in the relationship. We both felt like we got to a point where we couldn't really be our true selves, and I definitely do not want to be in a relationship like that again. And when I started really feeling that, addressed it again, not much movement was happening. And in hindsight, when we had our conversation after the breakup, which was recent, he was able to identify, like what you said, he got comfortable. He got to a place where he was like, oh, this is in the bag. I'm going to focus on these things that are important for me. And he did acknowledge that he wasn't listening to the things that were important for the relationship, and I could respect someone being accountable for that. And I also had to be accountable for the shit that I did, things I could have handled better. And so I feel we've gotten to a decent place. Again, the breakup wasn't something that he wanted. So of course, like it's like this mindset of like, okay, maybe if I rectify these things, can we get together in the future? But the reality of the situation is that I don't think we were compatible to start with, right? Like I knew this early on. So to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, okay, you can fix a few of these things, but there's still character traits that just are not going to mesh. You know what I'm saying? That are just not going to mix. And so I guess that's a harder pill to swallow in that regard. But I definitely get it. Now, in regards to like your situation, we've talked about this, and I think it's something important that you should mention is that you guys had an age gap. I think was important to address, because that was something that I brought up. I was like, hey, I love you. I want you to be happy.
Yeah, I know that definitely plays a factor into it. For me, again, I don't. You know how I am, man. I don't judge people on the weight of stats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like your social characteristics aren't built up by society; they're built up by you. Mm-hmm. So when you present yourself socially in a certain way, I'm gonna hold you to that, right? Even though in some situations I can see through some things that you're putting up socially, and we can have that conversation when you get comfortable enough. Mm-hmm. But with most of the females that I date, that's what it is. I date you for you. I don't date you for what you try to present, and that's how I present myself. Mm-hmm. I understand the social constructs. I understand how things are supposed to be presented in certain situations. I understand things to do and things not to do. But I'm also a realist. So for me, it's a constant struggle of like, okay, I get why we're doing that, but there's a line sometimes that I have to draw where it's like, I'm not doing this bullshit. Mm-hmm. Like Valentine's Day and things of that nature. Like, again, there's things I will celebrate with you, but we don't have to celebrate the way everybody else is celebrating. We can make it something else for us. And that's the kind of person that I am. So it's like when I see a female that I see characteristics in her that I'm like, okay. And I think that's something that maybe happened with you, right? Like where like some people who I think we have that obvious chemistry with, mm-hmm. and I think some people we have that compatibility with. Mm-hmm. And there's a very lucky few individuals that have that opportunity that get somebody that gets both. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I'm compatible with you, and at the same time, that chemistry is just like, wow, like I can't. No matter the age, no matter the time, no matter what happens, it's just like it's there no matter what, man. Like you see them as grandparents and like, why are they still like that? Like Jesus,
Mhm.
And I think for me and you, we were in situations of compatibility, right? Where it's like, okay, I may not see straight compatibility, but I see possibility. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes
Yep.
in those situations, it's not that we do ourselves a disservice, but we are not open as we could be with one another for hope's purpose. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I don't think it's a malicious thing where it's like, well, okay, I know down the line I'm not gonna like you anyway, but let's go on this route anyway. I think it's a thing of, man, I got hope for you. You got a chance. Like I think you really got a chance. And again, when you get to our age, if that chance is 80-90, as opposed to how when we were younger it needed to be 99-100, you'll take it. You'll take it if it seems good enough. You
Yeah.
will hop in that seat and go,
Yeah.
you know what, I'm gonna take this ride just because I feel like if we fix a couple of things in this car, we can
Yeah.
ride this
Be
out
a dope
forever.
ass car. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think I think that's what it was for me and you, was just situations where, especially with her, even though there was an age gap, the compatibility I felt that was there. There was a lot of things that chemistry wise with her, I felt like, okay, maybe this is that once in a lifetime thing, where there were chemistry wise things where I never found in another woman. Where it's
Mhm.
like there were things mentally that I thought of that she automatically was there at, as far as humor, as far as worldviews,
Mhm.
philosophy, things of that nature, where it's like, again, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. Where it's like that almost is a deal breaker with me. Where it's like if I feel like I gotta explain myself over and over to you, like what I
Mhm.
mean or how I feel, then it's like, which I guess maybe is a little selfish. That's like almost
No, which is not a bad thing too. It's just how we apply that selfishness, I think, you know. But being selfish is never
yeah.
but yeah, I hear you. So
So
yeah, I definitely it's true. What you said is absolutely true with both of us and what we do and how we kind of approach things um in relationships. That's yes, our flaw. So let's talk about I guess reflections and lessons, lessons and or miracles. One of my colleagues actually used we were talking, I was having like this moment, I don't know, like I was just like in a place after the breakup and she told me to like reflect on what I've been going through and then think about the lessons and then think about the miracles. And I kind of like sat there like miracles, like what do you mean by miracles? And when I went home and really processed it, I was like, oh, I really like how that sounds. Like she broke it down to me about there's things that you learn that you can do better, but there's also miracles. The miracle part of it is also like things that happened or didn't happen that um, was miraculous in a sense, right? Like that it um, could have gone either way, or pretty much things that you're going to take away as something that you can apply later. And I think she explained it a lot better than I'm explaining now. But what are some things that in your reflection that you took on as some lessons learned and things that you took on as, okay, this is a miracle for me, this is amazing that I was able to get through this thing, I was able to do this particular thing or not do this particular thing, if you thought about
um and you're talking about like with her, like things I'm thinking about after the fact.
it. Yeah, after the fact. Yep.
Um I think, I mean, there was a lot of growth through that time. It definitely was. So I think there was definitely, obviously, the miracle of me going through that health scare for the first time in my life and coming through the other side of that okay.
Mhm.
Um, I think there was a lot of positive. There was a lot of, I think if you call it miracles, and there was a lot of good to it. Like, again, there's a lot of, again, even though it didn't end successfully, it was, I think, for a while there, I think it showed I am ready for that step with an individual. Like I am,
Mhm.
like I think that's the growth, that's the miracle that I thought that again I would be at that point. Like you know what I mean? Like I thought that for me, if it didn't happen with my high school sweetheart, I
Mhm.
felt like it was never gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, and I think that's the miracle that the biggest miracle that I can probably take from it all is that I'm strong. The
Mhm.
biggest miracle is that I am unbreakable. You know what I mean? I'm Bruce Willis. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
it's one of those things where you know my track record. You know the things that I've gone through. It's not been a willful effort on my part to put myself in these situations where these things happen. It just so happens that I'm lucky, I guess, or unlucky, however you want to look at it. But again, that's how I look at it. That's the miracle that I'm built. I'm being built for something bigger. Like that's how I'm gonna look at it. You know what I mean? And I'm not gonna again just take it as just faith at that.
Yeah.
I'm putting the work behind that. That hey, if I'm put in this situation again, where the start of a potential relationship can start, where I feel like there are things that I need that this person needs to work on, we're going to address it from the get. It's not going to be one of those things where it's like I'm going to put it on the back burner because I feel like it's not something that it's going to be that big of a thing. I think I'm adult enough at this point in time where if I do meet another individual, we can have this conversation. It doesn't have to be a thing where you're opening yourself personally about something that's embarrassing. You know what I mean? It has to. I'm talking about literal things that make or break a relationship, literal things that make or break a marriage. Like those are the type of things that I think that we kind of mull over later on, but then, or at the beginning, and then later on becomes this thing that festers into an infection. You know what I mean? But again, this I think if you communicate, and I hate to say it, but the old timers are always right. The people who are in good relationships, they're in good relationships for a reason. You know, I attribute my my perfect relationship, honestly, in my mind's eye, has always been that stereotypical hood black couple that's been together forever. They may have kids in two different relationships, but they've never been married. They got kids together. They got kids apart, but they love each other. And you know they love each other. You feel it when you're around them. And when you with them, it's like it's always a 9. And it's like that's why they tell themselves they're never going to get married because they never want to get to that 10. They want to, in their mind, give themselves something to look forward to. You know what I mean? And it's not, and I think again, it's they don't ever do it that way on purpose. Nobody ever says that. But I always get that feeling from those type of couples that it's like, okay, that makes sense. If you don't go ahead and literally reach for that brass ring, so to speak, then you can continue working for that brass ring as long as you want to, but you have something to work for. If you get it, what do you have to work for? And I think as human beings, even in a relationship, we always need something to work for. And that's why I think as couples, we need to find ways to have goals for ourselves. But we don't have those kind of relationships or those kind of conversations because we don't, I can only speak for myself. I haven't had those examples when I was growing up. My mom, I grew up in a single parent household where the only example that I had was my mom and dad fighting for 13 years till they divorced. So I didn't have many examples of healthy relationships. Everybody around me was either a single mom or that's all my mom's friends were single moms. I didn't, and then eventually they disappeared. You never get the story of what happened. How did they get there to the happiness? You just get there at the happiness. It's like Disney. You know what I mean? Like the happiness just happens, but it's like you don't ever get the juicy details or the gritty details, which is even more important.
Which is more, beneficial.
The happiness is great. Everybody knows what the happiness feels like. You honeymoon all the time, but when it's hard with somebody that you really want to work it out with, it's hard to tell yourself it's gonna be okay when you allow yourself to get mentally to a point where I can't with this person. And you just in that moment allow yourself to get to that point. But once you get out of that cloud and out of that funk, you realize down the line, it wasn't that bad. Damn, you know what? I think if I would have fixed a couple of things here and there, maybe this person would have been as different. Like the person that I am now maybe would have been better for a different individual earlier in my life. You know what I mean? But again, that's not how life works. You deal with the cards that are in front of you, and that's what I'm saying. We don't do that enough. Where okay, I see you, I see how you are, who you are. There's a flaw here. Let's have a conversation about that. And I want you to do the same thing about me. Like it has to be a two-way street. Like you can't just beat up on somebody and then go, okay, hey, whoa, easy.
Right.
Don't talk about my mom not loving me.
Yeah, which is very true. I think my 2 main lessons, I have a few, but my 2 main ones is just exactly what you just mentioned is from out the gate, when I see something out the gate, the lesson is address things as you see them. It doesn't matter how fresh the relationship is, I think. I think out the gate, right? Um, and the second lesson for me was really be prepared to tackle what it is you're about to tackle, as opposed to um, kind of being ready, as opposed to kind of being prepared. Because I definitely was not as ready for relationships as I thought I was. And yeah, that feeling of like shit happened like after I committed. You know what I'm saying? And then I was like, fuck. You know what I mean? And then I should have just respected that and acknowledged that and be like, yo, you know what? I thought I was ready, but I think I still need a little bit more time to figure some shit out. And I kind of did that, but I kind of didn't. And I should have been more forceful with it. And the miracle for me is that throughout all that, even when realizing, you know what, I don't think I was as ready as I was supposed to be for this relationship, and we were going through all these things, and I started seeing the red flags, I still approached the relationship with a lot of grace. And I think that's growth for me as an individual. Like, I really took the time to process. I took the time to think things through. I didn't approach things out of anger. This relationship really grew me in a lot of ways. Excuse me. And a lot of ways that I didn't know that I could. Honestly, I felt like I could, and I thought about it, but I was actually able to apply those things in this relationship. And so that is the miracle for me. Like, I can definitely take that and move on and move forward with. And so, speaking about moving forward, kind of where are you now in that space? Like, where are you about your next steps for a relationship, or your next dynamic or situation that you might get into? So thinking about, are you just going to ride this out solo for a little while to kind of heal a little bit more, or are you like, if a situation arises, you're willing to like explore it?
Yeah, I think no, I mean I think I'm past the phase of I've had closure on it. So I'm no longer in that stage of like I'm still thinking about it. It's still something that's still affecting me. I think me and you have had the conversation several times about the importance of understanding when you're fully healed, because if not, it just again it's something you're just gonna bring with you into your next relationship. So I know I'm at that place where I'm healed, but I'm also at a place where it's just like, just because I'm not settling. Like, it's not like I'm not jumping into the first thing just because it presents itself. Don't get me wrong, during this time it'd be nice, a little companionship, but I'm not sacrificing anything just because of it. I think that's one of the things that I've learned to do. It's very hard. I think we can do an hour or two just by itself on the social aspect of it, on how society plays a part into pressuring you, and not even pressuring you, just making you feel like you feel pressured to have to jump in a relationship or have to be with somebody either by a certain time, or you just feel like, yo, everybody's together, like, and then everything comes in packages, and then couples are cheaper, things are better if you get two people instead of one, so restaurants advertise to you that way, everything advertises to you that way, so then you almost literally feel socially pressured to do it, and then that puts you in that kind of space. So I've had to learn how to not allow that to affect me, where it's like, I can see a couple online, I can be happy for them, I can hate for them sometimes too, depending on how gratuitous. Yeah, exactly, and depending on how gratuitous it is too. You know what I mean? If it's a cute couple, because we got to keep it funky with each other. Like, as human beings, when ugly people are together, it's harder to accept. Okay, when you see two beautiful people together, you can't be mad, man. Like, I see Josh. We have a common friend, Josh, and his oh my God, his fiance. They are just cute together. Cute as a button. Like, and again, I don't mind. I will even love it whenever they post something, because again, it's just I'm happy for him, but again, it's just I'm not that way with everybody. There's some people that are just putting it out there just for attention. It's just stop.
Yeah, and
Just
it's not
stop.
real. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I know when I've been there. I want to do everything with you. Let's take a picture. Let's take 5 selfies. Let's take a video. Hey, let's take
Yeah.
another video. You know what I'm saying? Hey. So, I feel like this socially there's so much that puts us in a certain headspace that I think we really have to have this conversation with our children now, where we have to have a certain understanding psychologically where we fit in our lives for ourselves
Mm-hmm.
versus where we fit in society.
Yeah.
It's very important to have a very firm understanding of who you are as an individual for yourself.
Yep.
Because again, if you're waiting for society to acknowledge you, that's a tough thing, man. And I know that it feels like there's a very, very easy avenue in today's social media craze to find that niche of I got rewarded in
Mm-hmm.
some way with either likes or a follow or a shout out in a post or something from a celebrity. Whatever gets your rocks off. If you're looking for that, it's a high demand, high risk, but it's a if you find it and you find somebody that gets it, it's a high reward, and that's the bad thing because you see it often where you're like, damn, but it works, but it
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't. They make you feel that way, but it doesn't.
Right.
Like, come on,
Yeah. Looking
I
for
I
happiness
would love it.
outside of yourself is never a thing to a thing to do, honestly. But I know you mentioned kind of society making you feel certain things, especially after a breakup. And when you're trying to also pick back up the pieces. So in your opinion, do you think there's a timestamp on how soon after a breakup you should kind of go back out there? Um, do you,
Depends. I think it depends on the individual.
right.
Um, Everybody's different, man. Again, and that's another thing where it's like society plays a factor in that, where it's like
Exactly. Because if you do it too soon, it's like, oh, you ain't care. But if you take too long, it's like, get over it already, right? Like, yeah, yeah.
and then there are some people who feel like I gotta find that answer in other people. No, you gotta find that answer with
Yeah.
yourself. Like you can't ask another person, hey, how long do you think I should? No.
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself that.
Yeah.
Look in the mirror and go, you ready for something? You really ready for something? Like you ready to give this crazy to somebody else and have
Correct.
them
Or are you
handle it?
ready to take on somebody's crazy or take on somebody's
Exactly.
shit?
Like, are you ready
Yeah.
for that give and take? Because if you're
Yeah.
not ready for the give and take, then you're just setting yourself up for hurt. That's all you're doing.
Yep.
And if you're doing that willingly, then you're just being selfish. And again, at that point, if you that type of person, then that's your thing. Then hey, all the power to you. But just understand that I firmly believe in karma in this life. If you put that type of effort into the world, that will come back to you. You
Mm-hmm.
will, unfortunately, and I don't want to speak this into existence for anybody, but I hate it because I see it play out too many times where you'll see somebody do it to somebody that didn't deserve it, that was there for them, that was really wanting
Mm-hmm.
to do it for them, and then but they did it for somebody else that they thought was going to give them that thing that they wanted, but they don't get. It
Mm-hmm.
always happens. You always chase what you want versus what you need. And
Yeah.
it never ends well. It never ends well. You need to find that balance, man. Find that balance with somebody that you need to give you what you want. Because if you find that, you golden. You golden. There's nothing more in this life that we need more than to find somebody that understands who you are and allows you to have faults. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like it's okay. Like I'm gonna be here for you. Like I love who you are. But if you change it along the way, I'm here. I'm
Right.
here with you. And just understand it may happen over here as well. The person I am today may not be the person that you wind up with in, a year from now, 10 years from now. And I need you to be okay with that because at the
Right.
core of it, we are a team. And I think that's a tough thing to find in today's day and age. It's a
Oh,
really tough thing to find, especially
absolutely.
if you ain't find it early.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think there's a timestamp for how soon you should date. However, I do think you should take time to actually heal from the breakup. And that could look however it looks, but you said it perfectly too. When you're able to look in the mirror and go, you ready to give this crazy to the person? And you're like, yeah. And then you can go, hey, are you ready to take on someone else's shit?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels good internally, and you're like, yeah, then that's when you're ready,
Yeah.
right? So however long it takes for that, because I literally did the same thing, right? Like part of me was kind of like, I don't feel there was no trauma, there was no drama that happened with me in my breakup. And so I was just like, oh, I could date. But then I sat there and thought, do I want to deal with somebody else? And I was like, hell no. And so I was like, nah, fuck it, I'm good. And I kept asking myself that. Sometimes you get that longing, like what you said. You watch, look at people on Facebook, or you watching certain TV shows or movies, and you're like, oh, shit, I want that. I want to feel like that. And then you sit down and realistically go, you really want to do? No, the fuck I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't. And so, yeah, and that's the reality situation. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so the next question I want to ask you is, so, we break up, whether it's ugly, it's not ugly, and there's some times where that person wants to be in your life again, right? But not, of
Mm-hmm.
course, in a intimate way. Do you think that, like, how much space do you think is needed before that type of dynamic can be created, if possible for you,
Funny
even
enough,
if that's even a thing for you?
I just recently, I think have I spoken to you about my ex Q?
No.
The Okay. So Q is pretty much like the love of my life. I think I may have mentioned
Oh,
her.
wait. You mean,
Um,
do I know of her? Yes. But you
yes.
mean, have you mentioned it recently? No.
No, okay.
Okay.
So actually, funny enough, recently me and her have been talking. And not talking in that fashion, but just talking in the hey, reaching out COVID-19, hoping you're all right. You don't got the Rona.
Right.
Um, hope you don't. Hope you're good. And it's just one of those things that it has evolved into a very cool. Which again is funny you asked that question because again, I mean, the way things ended with me and her, it wasn't the best. I was in a very young place. That was like my first substantial relationship that I had after after my high school
High
sweetheart.
school sweetheart, yeah.
Yeah. So again, and then that ended with me getting cheated on after 5 years of being with somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then so here I am with somebody where, damn, like it's chemistry, it is compatibility, it
Mm-hmm.
is everything rolled into one. And then on top of that, a lot of the base person who I am as a nurturer,
Mm-hmm.
she taught me.
Mm-hmm.
And I am grown enough and man enough to admit that. And I told her this. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I have been a much better man. I've been a much better lover. I've been a much better understanding. I've been a listener. I've been again. That's why I use the word nurturer. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
perfect word to encapsulate what she taught me. And again, recently having that conversation with her, it's brought up a lot of memories and understandings of who I was and who I've become and the growth that I've taken. Like literally in talking to her and some of the things that we went through and some of the things that we thought and how we thought back then. It's amazing to see that now the perspective, now that we're at this stage in our lives, how we look at things different and how it has opened our relationship to each other. Yeah, I mean it's been something that's been interesting. Um, it's kind of been cool the growth that we've gone through separately.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that we're at this point where we're talking about it again, it's just like we still see the comfort in one another. We still see like that chemistry. It's never left. Like that's something that's always been a common ground with me and her. Like and when I mean chemistry, it's the same thing as like a friendship, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
with me and you know what I mean? Like no matter how much time passes, when I see you, the love is still there. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
it's like a day hasn't passed, you know what I mean? Like it's the same type of thing with her. And it's a cool dynamic to have with someone that knows you intimately.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it allows you to have conversations about yourself and explore things about yourself that you normally would be allowed to do with regular, friends. Um, there's certain things that a friend, no matter how much you can get close to a friend, it's just there's a certain intimacy that you just you just can't have with a friend.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so that's it's been a cool thing. I mean, I think that for most people, in order to get to that place, time is important.
Mhm.
Um, I think the same thing as when you take the time to figure out if you're healed, to go to that next relationship or find the next relationship is the same thing. Um, when it comes to figuring out if you're ready to speak to someone in your past, whether it
Yeah.
was a person that ended good or bad,
Mhm. Mhm.
because again, even when it ends good, there's there it's not always a great thing because it almost becomes toxic. We
Mhm.
see it with some people, right, where they're on again, off again, on again, off again, on and off,
Yeah.
and it's just like, why do you guys keep doing this? And it's like, because it's never bad, right? It's like it's never great, but it's never to the point where it's like, I'm still cool with you, like we're still good. And
Yeah.
then you never find anybody else that you can find that same connection with. So you just like, you figure, you come back, and it's like you you do the roulette. It's like, okay, this person doesn't work, this person doesn't work, this person doesn't work. All right, I'm back to you. And it's like, I
Mhm.
might have landed back on you again. So hey, let's go.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
everybody's different. It takes time, and it takes it takes growth on both parties, and that's, I think, it's as willing as you would want to be sometimes, and you want to speak to somebody else um in your past. It has to be a two-way street. You can want to do what you want to do all you want to. That person may not want to talk to you. That
Mhm.
person may be in a place where they're no longer in that headspace anymore, where there's just like, hey, look, you remind me of a time of myself that I just don't want to be reminded of. And it
Yes.
could just be that. It could just be that. It has nothing to do with you. It just has to do with, hey, you put me in a headspace, or you put me in a place where I feel like another person, or I am another person, or reminded of
Yeah.
another person I don't want to be anymore. I
Yes.
left that behind.
Oddly enough, I've had a similar situation with an ex, but he was a pretty shitty ex. Uh, but the things that resonated with me with what you just said was, and it was just weird because I knew he was shitty, and my gut and my spirit was still telling me he's still probably a shitty person, but he has grown, and so I can acknowledge that he's grown in some ways, but things that you said that resonated with me is like there's a level when you have this level of chemistry with someone, that shit is like, it's crazy how it automatically kind of like just jumps back in. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're around that person or when you're speaking to them, that level of comfortability. And it's also this comfort in like, yo, I don't have to give you backstory, right? I don't have to explain things to you. You were there. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know
Exactly.
me enough for a level that things just, oh, we can just talk about, oh yeah, da 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 da, and then there's no, oh, let me explain to you who this is, or let me, you know what I mean? And that for real. And then chemistry, just having that connection. This also is something that I want to make sure that I carry with me into my next dynamic. Like I need it. Like I need it. For certain. Granted, this person was pretty shitty and all we really did have was chemistry and not compatibility. Um, it's no, honestly, it's really what carried the relationship, probably way further than
No,
it
I
could
laugh because
go.
I've been there.
Yeah, I know you know. I know you know. uh, I still need it though. Like it gave me this like just like it ignited stuff inside of me that I was like I literally forgot was there, you know. But on the
Yeah,
flip side of it, exactly what you said. Being around certain people, also, you got to be mindful and careful about where you are in your process of growing. It took me to a place where I didn't want to be mentally, like automatically, just how easily the chemistry kind of ignited. That those same feelings of who I was in that time and space came back too. Like
yeah,
like my anxiety just shot up to a fucking 9 when I was lingering in a fucking 2. You know what I'm saying? Um,
yeah,
and that's important to pay attention to. That's your spirit. That's something the universe telling you. Nah, fam, don't do it. Don't go back to that place or space. No, for real. And so there was a short period of time where we were conversing, that me and this particular ex, and trying to like be friends, and like I just couldn't fight that feeling, and it just was telling me, nah, I don't know. And granted, eventually he showed who he was, which, you know, I expected, but it didn't hit me. Um, it wasn't a surprise when it hit me, rather. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lie and say I didn't feel a kind of way about it, but I was also able to process it and be like, you know what, you know, it is what it is. This person is still human. At least he has grown. Um, in some regards. And again, we had that similar conversation like you had with your ex about like, yeah, you know what, this dynamic helped me grow like this. And he was telling me how being with me helped him grow like that. And I was just like, all right, cool. I can respect that and take that with me moving forward. You know what I'm saying? It
Yeah.
wasn't for naught. I didn't experience that for bullshit. And even if we are not together and we can't be friends, that's cool. At least I know that that time spent wasn't a waste of time, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely understand that. I definitely get that. And so kind of to like wrap this up, I guess what are some things you might want to leave the listeners with who might be going through, you know, a breakup right now or just had a breakup? What are some things you can leave them with to kind of help them and guide them through it?
Never forget that the most important person to love is yourself.
Okay.
Um, Above all else.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's not
and
selfish.
yeah, exactly. Like that's the important thing is that, and you know when you're being selfish. Like that's the thing. Like we're adults. You know, anybody who's listening to this, you're an adult. You know what you're doing. If you're not
Hmm.
adult, please have your mom and dad's permission to be listening to this. Um, but no, it's one of those things that I really feel like everybody has a choice to make, and you know when you have that choice to make when you're just too self-involved. But you know, a little self-involvement is not bad when you're doing it for the betterment and health of the relationship with another person. You
Hmm.
know, remember that loving yourself sometimes means asking somebody else to take a moment to let you love yourself. And
Hmm.
that's the thing. It's not always that loving yourself doesn't mean that you have to stop loving another person. It just
Hmm.
means that, hey, give me some time to love you better by learning how to love. If I
Yeah.
don't know how to love from my point of view, I can't love you fully. It's impossible. So, you know, I think if the number one thing I could leave anybody with is just learn to love yourself and learn to allow other people to love themselves too. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's a pull, it's a give and take thing when you're dealing with human beings. You know, I think it's important to remember who you are as a human, and then remember that other people are that too. That
Hmm.
whatever you're feeling, other people are probably feeling too.
Hmm.
So remember to always try to be objective, always as much as you can. I know it's difficult sometimes, depending on the situation,
Yeah.
especially if it's something that leads you emotionally. It's hard. I'm guilty of this. I can say this right now, but Lord knows if you get me 38 hot, I may not be.
Right. But it's also
As
growth in knowing that and accepting that and being aware of it. I think awareness also helps you deal with it when the situations do
yeah,
arise. So,
that's true. So yeah, I mean, yeah, love yourselves, guys, ladies, please. You know, wait, in this age, I don't, whoever you, they
yeah.
are, us, we, love yourselves,
Right.
okay? Human beings, love yourselves.
Right. Absolutely. I think I would add if you're anyone's going through a breakup right now, um, I definitely second what Adi said about loving yourself for sure. It's not selfish. Take that time, take that space. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about it. But I think I would add also to not focus, though yes, breakup, a lot of us might feel like it's a failure, you know, um but don't focus on necessarily the things that went wrong. Think about the things that were learned, right? Think about the positive aspects of it, because it's going to help you get over the breakup a lot faster. Sitting and
Facts.
festering on, oh, can't believe this person did this to me. I can't believe it's just going to make you sit in that space longer. You're not going to grow out of it fast enough, right? It's not to say don't acknowledge the pain and the hurt. Acknowledge it and feel it, but don't sit there, right? Like, think about what things you did to account to that hurt and the pain, and then think about what the other person did, process it, but then think about the good, right? You was with this person for X amount of period of time for a reason. why. Think about the things that felt good. Think about the things you want to continue to do in your next dynamic. So just try to focus on the things that worked, the things you want to carry over, and it'll definitely help you get through the breakup. And then when you get to a point where you don't think of the person and get upset and get hot, then if that person is open to that and they listen, and I mean they're like kind of extending that already to you, that flag, that white flag to you about friendship or something, that's when you should engage in that. Don't still have all these feelings pent up inside of you and then try to be someone's friend, because it's going to get muddy and weird and unnecessary. And so that's what I would share with you all about breakups in this time and space if you're dealing with them. So I want to thank you, Adi. I love you. Hopefully
Love
you
you back,
come
boo.
back on another episode,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I am right now very free. So
Yeah, we all
you
very
know,
free.
and I always love a good philosophical talk or any kind of talk really that expands the human mind or helps anybody else connect. We're all going through this. I think that the most important thing about this is that, remember, guys, we're all going through something, that's
Mhm.
bigger than us. That even though we're talking about breakups and going through them, there's something that's bigger than all of that. That at the end of the day, human life is precious. There are things that's bigger than, feelings. You got
Mhm.
people that don't have time to think about who they love and who they didn't get to be with and why they didn't
They
get to be
trying to
with. Some people are
survive.
just thinking about,
Mhm.
I just want the next breath.
Mhm.
So just remember, love. That's why it's important to love yourself and love others and do it the right way, guys. Because again, it's all we have at the end of the day is the memories that we're left with, and you want them to be as positive and love filled as possible, man. If you're gonna leave your life behind as a house, so to speak, have it every room be filled with love.
That's perfectly worded. On that note, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. For today's Connection Corner, I leave you with a post by Ebony Davis. It reads, I think we have multiple soulmates, and the one you end up with depends on the work you've done to evolve your own soul. I think there's a soulmate for every level of your journey. I think as you grow, so does the quality of your partnerships. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Oasis podcast. I hope you were able to find something that resonated with you on your journey. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode, and like us on Instagram at the Oasis podcast. If you have any questions or comments, direct message us on Instagram or email us at ajaysoasis@gmail.com. Again, that's AAYJAYSOASIS@gmail.com.